This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a professional website, strengthen your brand, and grow your business online. A talent like Mel Gibson is rare even in Hollywood. It's just as rare to become a star in only a couple of years, and it's even rarer for an actor to direct a good movie, even if he's trying. All that success caught up with Gibson, but the actor was faster. Today, let's explore Mel Gibson's career. How did a bar fight help him become a talented actor? What did Gibson actually do on set that made one director turn gray overnight? Which actor surely must have little home altars dedicated to Mel? What miracle kept his career alive after Hollywood buried him? And in which legendary role might he return? This is Hollywood Lore. Let's go. People usually think Mel Gibson is Australian, but it's not exactly true. The actor was born in the USA and only moved to Australia when he was 12. Well, technically, it was his dad, Hutton Gibson, who moved the whole family there. Bad people say the reason was Mel and his brothers. Hutton didn't want them to end up in Full Metal Jacket IRL. So really, Mel's about as Australian as Russell Crowe. Papa Gibson worked pretty hard on the new continent, and by the time he was done, the 6 kids he already had turned into 11.
I've seen this raw strength only once before.
That probably explains why the future actor's youth wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Those wild tales about surviving on a few bucks a week are familiar to Gibson, even though his granddad was a millionaire. The line, "We all come from childhood," pretty much sums up Mel's whole career. He went to a Catholic college where his dad had placed him, and becoming an actor was never part of the plan. Gibson wanted to draw or write, but then the family stepped in again. His sister applied to the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney on his behalf, and Mel didn't fight it. He just visited the place and showed something so crazy, they accepted him instantly. Some guys like Liam Neeson or Bruce Willis had to be background props in tiny films and TV shows for quite a while, but Gibson got lucky pretty much right away. His big screen debut was in a small 1977 film called Summer City, and right after that, the actor already landed a cult role. Mel found out how lucky he was about a year later when Mad Max hit theaters worldwide. How he ended up in that movie is an interesting question, with a crapload of legends answering it. The most famous one says Gibson came to the audition accompanying his buddy and expected nothing. Mostly because the night before, Mel had an intense bar chat about some social religious topics with a bunch of rugby players. That meant at the audition, the actor's face looked like it had gone through a blender. Seeing that mug, the casting crew figured Mel'd make a great background thug. A couple weeks later, when Gibson came back bruise-free, they realized this thug might actually be leading man material. Director George Miller later denied this whole version of events and claimed he saw the main character in Mel from the start, even with bruises and all. Mad Max didn't look like a massive jackpot at first, mainly because of its modest $350,000 Australian dollar budget, which didn't promise any greatness. But the creators wanted greatness pretty badly and refused to give up without a fight. After buying a costume for Gibson's character, the crew realized they'd nearly blown the entire wardrobe budget, so they started searching in their own closets to dress the rest of the cast. The situation with the cars was even more exciting. In a movie that was all about wild car chases, they only had 3 working vehicles. So the crew played Tetris with them, shifting and repainting cars between scenes. One of those was actually the director's own ride, which they had no shame smashing up right in front of him. As for the biker scenes, someone had a real galaxy brain moment and offered a couple crates of beer to members of local motorcycle club. So yeah, no surprise there were plenty of bikes and bikers on screen. Now we know all those wild efforts paid off big time. The first wave of success hit in Australia, where Mad Max made over $5 million on a budget of $350,000 and got one of the country's major film awards. Small international distributors immediately got excited and started buying the rights to screen the film around the world. It's generally believed that Mad Max ended up earning over $100 million globally. That number might not be exact, but even if it's less, the figures are still seriously impressive. Because of the insane gap between budget and box office, the movie still regularly pops up at the top of lists of the most profitable movies of all time. Not bad for a film made from some scrap in the backyard. First comes the idea, then you need to proceed. And that's when our today's sponsor, Squarespace, may come in handy. With this all-in-one platform, it's possible to create your own professional website faster than Mickey Rourke pisses off another producer. Why that fast? Well, because there's no need to make 100 variants of the same page like Fincher or measure everything out like good old Kubrick. Just answer some questions, and Blueprint AI will do everything for you, maybe even write you a symphony or whatever. Or maybe not, because can he actually do it? But hey, maybe you can. Create video content, tutorials, premium lessons, video hosting, and library tools here are neat. Set up a paywall and charge customers, or use scheduling to let them book calls or sessions so you could coach them exactly like Edward Norton coaches directors and scriptwriters on set. And additionally, built-in SEO tools help to stay visible in search engines and not vanish like half of Steven Seagal's screen time in Executive Decision. Go to squarespace.com/HollywoodLore for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use code HollywoodLore for 10% discount off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Why would you want to get rid of such a brilliant gift?
And we're going back to Mad Max being an absolute beast in terms of profits. Later, the Blair Witch Project pushed it from top position, but that one had a massive steroid boost in the form of a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, something Mad Max never had. So that win clearly stinks a bit, but all those records came later. Back in 1979, while Mad Max was still fresh, another film with Gibson came out, a low-key drama called Tim, which earned him the first acting award. Mel did a few more films and TV shows, including Attack Force Z, which no one really cared about. That collected dust on the shelf for almost 3 years, and only got released after Gibson suddenly turned into a star. The first movie made with full awareness that Mel Gibson was that guy from Mad Max was the war epic Gallipoli, directed by Peter Weir, who would later make The Truman Show and Dead Poets Society. Gallipoli hit theaters in 1981 and did well. And thanks to Mel's rising fame, it even got a US release, which seriously boosted the overall box office. That same year, the Mad Max sequel made it to theaters. Director George Miller wasn't eager to return and considered an offer to direct Rambo instead, but in the end went back to his brainchild. This time, the budget was bumped up to $3 million, and it made 24 at the global box office. Not quite the numbers the first film made, but still a clear win. Peter Weir wasn't so lucky the second time around, though. He cast Gibson in his next project, The Year of Living Dangerously, and it tanked at the box office. The film redeemed itself through awards. It snagged an Oscar and a Cannes nomination. And with that kind of recognition, you can forget about the financial failure for a second. So Mel didn't even really notice any flops. On the contrary, very important people from Hollywood and beyond started chasing the actor. In 1983, Gibson was even proposed to play James Bond. And not by some random suit, but Albert Broccoli, the producer behind the whole thing. Mel turned the role down, though, worried that the 007 shadow would stick to him for the rest of his career. Instead of taking the surefire Bond hit, Mel went ahead and flopped 3 times in a row, with The River, Mrs. Soffel, and The Bounty. And again, none of those flops hurt too bad. Critics loved all 3, and the movies scored Oscar and Golden Globe noms, and even made it to Cannes. Plus, Gibson got paid $500,000 for The River, a personal record at the time. And you can bet he didn't see that as any kind of failure. Only The Bounty probably made Mel sob a bit. The project actually had decent chances of commercial success. According to pretty much everyone involved, it was Gibson himself who sabotaged those chances. The Bounty was the first movie where Mel's love for booze really showed up. The actor drank hard and all the time, which seriously pissed off Anthony Hopkins, who'd been sober for 10 years by then. Sir Hopkins tried to have some concerned dad talks with the young actor, asking him how it felt to drink corner shop piss at 3 a.m., get into drunk political arguments, and wake up the next morning covered in crap and fresh bruises. Mel would just smile and say something like,
"This is fantastic. I'm in heaven."
In our Liam Neeson video, we already mentioned how Gibson's admirable dedication to drinking ended up being a favor to Neeson. Makeup artists had to layer Mel in foundation to cover the bruises, shoot him from certain angles, or cut his scenes entirely. That meant more screen time for Neeson and Daniel Day-Lewis. Their careers definitely got a boost thanks to Mel's alcohol determination, and funnily enough, his own didn't suffer one bit. The press claimed Gibson to be the new Marlon Brando anyways, and everyone was hyped waiting for the actor's next move. They ended up waiting a while. After The Bounty flopped and Mel got caught driving a car drunk as a pig, he disappeared from screens for a couple years. The only exception was Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome in 1984. Once again, George Miller didn't want to make a third film, and once again he made it anyway. This time, though, he threw in Kids, Philosophy, and Tina Turner, all of which came with a $10 million price tag. That's 34 times more than the first movie, and just in the US, the film brought in $36 million. So yeah, the third Mad Max also did fine, and that's not even counting the international numbers. After the third Mad Max, Gibson stayed on his farm in Australia till 1987 trying to quit drinking. That glorious plan clearly didn't turn out well, since in his next project, the actor was right back on track. And the funny thing is, it didn't just not hurt his role, but made it legendary. When Mel started showing up to the Lethal Weapon set after sipping 5 beers, director Richard Donner was freaked out at first. Donner was probably kicking himself for not casting Sylvester Stallone, Pierce Brosnan, or Bruce Willis instead. All of them had been considered for the lead. Bruce Willis refused, saying the movie was too violent and Delta to do Die Hard, where apparently the violence level was just right. Funny thing is, Die Hard had been previously offered to Gibson, but he chose Lethal Weapon. Donner quickly realized it was pointless to fight Mel's drinking. Even when the actor was drunk to the point of inability to find his own ass, he still delivered exactly what the scene needed. Observing this phenomenon, the director decided not to mess with the creative process. According to legend, the only time Mel had some trouble was during a scene with a gun near his face. The actor just couldn't show the right emotion, so he suggested they load the gun and try again. The bullets were blanks, but even those can land you in the hospital under the right or most likely wrong circumstances. Donner later said that day gave him some extra gray hair, and additionally, he had to cover up their little stunt from the insurance company. Donner's decision to stay out of Mel Gibson's special creative process led to a few things. First, Lethal Weapon caught the eye of Franco Zeffirelli, who was so blown away by the drunken master's skills that he immediately offered Mel the role of Hamlet. And second, Lethal Weapon became a massive hit. With a $15 million budget, it made $120 at the box office. And suddenly, every script in Hollywood was flying straight at Gibson. The first of those scripts was The Untouchables by Brian De Palma, who really wanted Mel for the lead. The actor liked the script, but Tequila Sunrise came with a bigger paycheck. So he went there instead and added another pretty forgettable film to his resume. The Untouchables went to Kevin Costner, who became a superstar partly thanks to Gibson's refusals. Mel also gave Michael Keaton's career a good boost. In 1987, tons of actors were auditioning to play Batman, but Mel was the first one to receive the offer without any auditions. Officially, Mel turned it down because he was busy shooting the Lethal Weapon sequel. But bad people say it was all about dirty evergreen pieces of paper again. Mel didn't mind running around in tights, just not for anything less than $10 million. Maybe Mel would have even gotten that kind of money, but turns out he wasn't the only smartass in the room. Jack Nicholson was asking for the same amount, which meant the studio had to blow 2/3 of the entire film's budget just on 2 salaries. And that was an obvious no. But let's not accuse Gibson of being greedy. He got just $5 million for the Lethal Weapon sequel and was perfectly fine with it. So the most believable theory is fear of comic books. Back then, most actors didn't want to touch the whole superhero thing, even for $10 million. Nicholson wasn't super thrilled either, and only signed on when they threatened to give his part to Robin Williams. Once Nicholson was in, there was no more room for Gibson, so he went to do Lethal Weapon 2. The second Lethal Weapon could have become a totally different movie. Donner found the original script too gloomy and scrapped it, after which Jeffrey Boehm took over the writing. He gave the director 2 versions, one dark, the other pure comedy, and Donner asked to combine both. Probably a nightmare task, but Boehm nailed it, sometimes even rewriting scenes during the shoot. A few of those rewrites were based on someone's latest brilliant ideas. For instance, Joe Pesci didn't like his character. In the original script, the guy was an extremely unpleasant douche.
I make you laugh. I'm here to f***ing amuse you.
So the actor asked for changes, and they were made. Pesci also kept improvising on set, and that's basically how we ended up with the Leo Getz we all know. When the film was shot, it turned out no one was sure how exactly it should end. So 3 different endings were made and shown to the test audiences. In the first one, both Gibson's and Patsy Kensitt's characters survived. In another, they both died. And in the third, only Kensitt's character bit the dust. Audiences reacted really badly to Martin Riggs dying, so that version went to the dumpster right away. And that's how Richard Donner decided the lady's fate. He figured Gibson's character needed a heavier dose of motivation, and a couple bruises on the love interest just weren't enough. Lethal Weapon 2 cost almost twice as much as the first one, but made $227 million at the box office. Seeing these numbers, very important people from the studio immediately ordered a 3rd part, but Gibson was itching to flop in some other movies first, so he asked to put the sequel on hold. To be fair, Mel did have one box office hit in 1990. Bird on a Wire made $139 million on a budget of $20, though originally Gibson wasn't supposed to be in this project at all. It was meant for real-life couple Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, since they'd just crushed it on home video with Overboard. But Kurt was already starring in Tango and Cash, so he recommended Mel instead, who, by the way, is 11 years younger than Hawn. Everyone loved the idea, but the problem was the film couldn't actually afford Mel, as he wasn't working for food anymore. The actor agreed only after producer Ted Field proposed his massive mansion for the spring and summer, where Gibson's whole big family could happily hang out. Bird on a wire made bank, but that definitely wasn't the case for the rest of Mel's 1990 projects. Sure, some would say Hamlet was never meant to be a major commercial hit, and that's fair. Even more than that, the movie had funding issues, and Mel had to go find the money for the shoot somewhere. To do that, the actor even founded his own production company, Icon Productions. And as some of you might have guessed, that name is no accident. Hamlet was clearly aiming for all the big awards, but critics suddenly weren't impressed. The movie received just a couple of technical Oscar nominations, and that was it. Hard to say if Hamlet broke even. The budget was $16 million, the official box office was $21 million. But it also got sold off to tons of local distributors, so the real numbers are a mystery. Hamlet's underperformance was kind of expected, but the flop of Air America really gave a painful nutshot. Especially frustrating was the fact that the movie only came to life because of Gibson himself. The actor really liked that moment in Lethal Weapon, where they mentioned Air America's secret ops. There was already a project by that name, but it had been shelved. When the producers found out Mel was interested and willing to star for just $7 million, they immediately blew the dust off Air America. That film started Mel's friendship with Robert Downey Jr., and we talk more about it in our video on Robert. That bromance would turn out to be a big deal for both, but more on that later. So in a way, Air America wasn't a total fail for them in the long run. At the time, though, it sure felt like one. The movie cost $35 million and only made $31 million. On top of that, the press just hated it. Not that Gibson even noticed, really. On the contrary, the actor still had plenty of fire left to give Kevin Costner's career another boost. In 1991, Mel turned down not one, but two promising projects: Robin Hood and Oliver Stone's JFK. Both roles went straight to Costner, and Robin Hood alone made $390 million at the box office. JFK didn't make quite as much, but it did pretty well too. Gibson actually wanted to be in JFK and even talked with Oliver Stone about participating. But then Richard Donner showed up and said it was just time to show some respect to very important people from Studio Warner and finally make Lethal Weapon 3. Mel got $10 million for that one, almost a third of the whole budget. And Lethal Weapon 3 earned as much as the first two movies combined. Important people figured such numbers deserved a little reward, so they invited Gibson, Richard Donner, and producer Joel Silver to dinner. Dessert was supposed to be a surprise. Brand new Range Rovers for all three. But the guests had a surprise of their own. The director assumed the dinner was to talk about future plans for the franchise. So he brought along Rene Russo, Joe Pesci, Danny Glover, and screenwriter Jeffrey Boehm. The studio staff really had to break a sweat that night, running all over Los Angeles and looking for more cars. And of course, stalling the dinner with every excuse they could think of just to buy and deliver all the vehicles in time. That same year, Gibson had another box office hit, Forever Young, which made $128 million on a budget of $20 million. Looks like Mel started getting a bit bored, so he decided to spice up his shining career with some directing experience. In 1993, he made The Man Without a Face, playing the lead role too. But the movie earned only $25 million, costing $20 million. And here's a quick note for the newbies. If you think that means the studio made $5 million in profit, we've got bad news for you. You can pretty much double that budget number. That's how much usually goes into marketing, campaigns, screenings, all that. And the studio doesn't actually get the full box office take either.
There's some sort of mistake. I bought a drink and some popcorn, and now I have no money.
So, long story short, $25 million on a budget of $20 million is just crap. But The Man Without a Face didn't suffer much from that flop. Critics liked it, audiences liked it. So Mel figured he was talented from every angle and might direct something on a bigger scale. But before running around in a skirt, Gibson starred in Maverick, a movie directed by his friend and Lethal Weapon filmmaker Richard Donner. Obviously, Mel agreed to do it out of pure big friendship, and the $15 million paycheck was just a nice bonus. Jodie Foster, who joined the project after Meg Ryan bailed, asked for another $5 million, and Donner took $10 million himself. All that ballooned the budget of a modest comedy western into a monstrous $75 million, making it one of the most expensive films for that genre. Maverick had a script, sure, but Donner was a huge fan of improvisation, so he basically shot whatever he thought was fun. That's why the movie's got meta-modern humor. The characters even joke around with references to the Lethal Weapon franchise, and audiences loved it. Despite the insane budget, Maverick didn't sink and made $183 million at the box office. The film even managed to make more money in its second weekend than in the first. Adding another box office success to his collection, Gibson finally moved to make the film that would also turn him into a talented director. Gibson spent a while looking for a project worthy of his incredible talent. Eventually, the actor realized his mind kept circling back to Braveheart and chose this one. Originally, Terry Gilliam was supposed to direct, but he decided he'd better make a movie about monkeys and left. That's when Mel took the director's chair and started looking for someone to play the lead, settling on Brad Pitt. Gibson also wanted Sean Connery in the film, but Connery turned it down, though not before teaching Mel how to properly pronounce the word goulash.
The Brit rolls with my goulash.
Studio Warner didn't care much about Mel's directing ambitions, but they sure as hell cared about Mel himself. They agreed to give some cash for the movie on one condition. Gibson signed on for another Lethal Weapon. Mel didn't like this clever move, so he went to Paramount and 20th Century Fox instead. But for some reason, neither of them was too interested in funding his film either. They'd only agree to the full budget if Gibson himself played the lead. And that's how William Wallace, supposedly a 20-year-old lad, ended up being portrayed by nearly 40-year-old Mel. Once the movie hit theaters, everyone who'd ever opened a history book got very excited. People accused Gibson of basically making some fantasy film, to which he quite reasonably replied that realism was never the goal, just entertainment. That's why his version of Wallace came out so romanticized, when in reality the guy was closer to some pragmatic leader, like Askeladd. In the American box office, Braveheart had a rough start and made only a couple million more than the total flop Johnny Mnemonic. What saved it was the international box office. Worldwide, the film earned $213 million, costing $72. And since those box office numbers came with 5 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director, Braveheart was soon seen as a huge success. Gibson was already making $15 million per role, but after that instantly became one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. So for his next film, Ransom, he asked for $20 million. The shoot often had to be paused because Gibson visited tons of film festivals with Braveheart, where he was getting awards for incredible talent. Still, Ransom did awesome at the box office, earning over $300 million. But the following year, Mel finally faced his own streak of flops. The actor started with Conspiracy Theory, another collab with Richard Donner. Half of the $75 million budget went just to pay Gibson and Julia Roberts, and Donner, who never mistreated himself, pocketed another $5 million. So you could say Conspiracy Theory was shot with whatever loose change was left after 3 paychecks. It wasn't a total disaster, earning $137 million, and the reviews from both audiences and critics weren't bad either. But you can't really call that a success. Gibson didn't stay away from Donner for long. Right after Conspiracy Theory, they jumped into shooting Lethal Weapon 4. The script for this one was in the works since the 3rd part came out. In fact, they were already drafting ideas for a 5th one, but Mel made it clear he was done. All that pre-production script calibrations lead to more rewrites just as filming began. Since Lethal Weapon had turned into a full-on family franchise, some of the rewrites directly contributed to the financial well-being of its family members. For instance, the original script didn't include Joe Pesci's character, but the family council decided he should show up anyway, so Pesci dropped by for a week and got $1 million for it. Mel asked for $25 million himself, and the rest of the cast didn't walk away empty-handed either. The family vibe ballooned the budget for the 4th Lethal Weapon, but even more money got burned because of constant script changes. Additionally, Gibson's busy schedule made the filmmakers run around vibrating and overpaying for just about everything, like it was a normal thing to pay to shut down streets in one neighborhood, only to decide at the last minute to film somewhere else. And pay for that too. In the end, the 4th Lethal Weapon budget ended up bigger than the first 3 combined, while the box office brought in only $285. Mel's bad streak didn't stop there. Next came Payback, directed by Conspiracy Theory screenwriter Brian Helgeland. Moving from writer to director was a promotion for Helgeland, so he decided to cook something so intense and gloomy it would make everyone space out. In a way, Helgeland nailed it. When very important people from the studio saw the rough cut, they almost died and begged Mel Gibson to do something about what they just witnessed. The movie was reshot, the budget bloated to $90 million, and the release got delayed for a year. Usually that kind of gymnastics results in a box office flop. And yeah, that's exactly what happened here. The same fate hit the small artsy movie The $1 Million Hotel. But while some experimental film can afford to fail financially, nobody expected that from The Patriot that followed. This misfortune is often blamed on the movie's totally unplanned R rating, while initially it should have been PG-13. Because of that nuance, Harrison Ford ran away from the movie earlier. saying they'd handed him a script of some cheesy teen melodrama, so he felt kind of sick and stopped reading it. Mel chose another approach and pressured the studio to allow the R rating. Director Roland Emmerich backed him up, and the studio eventually gave in, which definitely affected the film's box office. By agreeing to star in The Patriot, Gibson once again boosted some careers, this time of two fellow Australians, one fake like Mel himself, and one very real. The first was Russell Crowe. Ridley Scott originally offered Gladiator to Gibson, but the actor turned it down. Later, Mel said he just didn't feel like running around on screen again with a sword and a skirt. And the second person who owes Mel for pushing his career in the early 2000s was Hugh Jackman. The producers of X-Men really wanted Gibson to play Wolverine, but the talented actor asked for nearly half the film's entire budget. The studio dropped the talks instantly, and Mel walked away to make movies where that kind of paycheck didn't freak out anyone. For What Women Want, Gibson asked for his usual $25 million and got it. Odds are, the women on set would have paid even more. Everyone, including director Nancy Meyers, said working with Mel was a big pleasure. Helen Hunt was especially excited, recalling the endless takes of kissing scenes with Gibson. At her request, the actor even got shaved several times a day, so his stubble wouldn't get in the way of the very special creative process. For all that effort, Mel got a Golden Globe nomination, and the $70 million movie made $374, becoming the actor's biggest box office hit at the time. That record was broken a couple of years later when Signs came out in 2002. Sure, the best version of that script exists in another movie, but the original still made over $400 million worldwide. Mel's other film that year, We Were Soldiers, didn't do nearly as well, but by then Mel gave zero damns. He was too busy pulling Robert Downey Jr. out of the deep butthole his career had fallen into. For Robert, Gibson turned down a role in The Singing Detective and fought with the studio to keep Downey in the cast. Back then, no one wanted to deal with such a funny actor, but thanks to Mel, important people finally agreed to give him a shot. And of course, while helping Robert, Mel was also busy making his own movie. No major studio wanted to touch a graphic biblical drama filmed in a dead language, so Gibson had to fully bankroll The Passion of the Christ out of his own production company's pocket. Most of you have probably heard how rough the shoot was. Like every couple of days, another swarm of locusts showed up out of nowhere and stuff like that. The worst of it fell on Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus. At one point, he even got struck by real lightning. The controversy around the project, the killer R rating, and Mel's public claims that the Holy Spirit helped him make the film didn't hurt the box office, but might have actually helped. On a $30 million budget, The Passion of the Christ made $610, got showered with award nominations, and even earned praise from Pope John Paul II. Encouraged by that kind of approval, Gibson got back in the director's chair for Apocalypto. This time, he decided to take it even further and cast people literally off the streets to make it feel more authentic. Rudy Youngblood, who played the lead, was one of those finds and agreed without having much idea what he was getting into. Like in one scene, Rudy was told to jump off a cliff, and the newbie actor strictly refused to do it. Even the presence of safety gear didn't change his mind, so Gibson decided to show his professional acting skills and jumped himself. Only after Mel survived, Rudy agreed to fly a bit as well. According to witnesses, he ended up jumping off that cliff about 10 times because the cameraman either forgot to hit record at the crucial moment or some other ridiculous crap kept happening. After Apocalypto came out, the same thing happened as with all of Gibson's other movies. Every history enthusiast immediately got worked up and started punching the film. What pissed the big experts off the most was the level of brutality on screen. Mel was instantly labeled a racist for completely ignoring roasting marshmallows over fire and building rainbows, which of course was how Maya civilization really spent its days. And the wicked director focused only on the sacrifices and guts. These historical nuances didn't matter much. The film made $122 million on a budget of $40 anyways. But compared to Gibson's previous projects, the box office obviously dropped, something most people blamed on the growing scandal surrounding the actor. There were several scandals, actually. First, in 2006, Mel got busted again for drunk driving. During the arrest, Mel called the cops, quote-unquote, sugar tits, and threatened to screw them all. On top of that charming flirt, the actor added a few very interesting opinions about a certain flag with a blue star on it. The audio of that conversation leaked, and shit officially hit the fan. Burying a career as big as Gibson's wasn't easy, but the actor sure did his best to help. During the scandal, He started divorcing his wife, then quickly showed up in public with a Russian pianist. After their breakup and her accusations of domestic abuse, more of Gibson's private recordings leaked, where he freely shared his thoughts about rainbows and the black color. At some point, Mel finally realized things were taking a nasty turn. The actor once again threw himself into fighting his drinking habits, even asking the court to give him more time for that noble mission. Gibson claimed it was all about the beer, and without it, he was the nicest guy around and would never have said any of those bad things. The scandals and personal chaos drove Gibson out of Hollywood for 4 years. The actor only returned in 2010, when Edge of Darkness somehow managed to make it to theaters, and it flopped hard, making $80 million with the same budget. It was pretty much the only contract Mel managed to land during that time. The actor's friends tried to help. Jodie Foster cast him in The Beaver. Robert Rodriguez gave a spot in Machete Kills, and Stallone invited him in The Expendables 3. For that cinematic gem, Gibson earned his first ever Golden Raspberry nomination. Around that time, he also squeezed out 2 low-budget projects, Get the Gringo, which he funded himself, and Bloodfather. The tendency was impressive, obviously leaning to kick-ass grandpa path, but nowhere near Liam Neeson level for sure. To be fair, in 2010, one truly solid offer took place. The role of Odin in Thor, but Gibson turned down the comic book thing again. Really ironic considering Marvel's golden boy Robert Downey Jr. was openly trying to pull Mel out of exile, even asking the audience at an awards show to understand and forgive Mel. Word is, that night, a few people actually did. Still, most people agree that the real turning point, the moment Hollywood finally forgave Mel Gibson, came with Hacksaw Ridge in 2016. Mel had to work pretty hard to get the money for the film. The actor even had to pull a little trick filming in Australia and filling the cast with Australian actors just to qualify for government subsidies. Gibson himself originally wanted to play the role that later went to Vince Vaughn, but in the end he changed his mind. Mel said he wanted to focus entirely on directing, though many believe the real reason was different. Loud, hot-tempered Sergeant Howell, played by Gibson, could have easily triggered some flashbacks, reminders of the scandals that both he and Hollywood were desperately trying to forget. Hacksaw Ridge made $180 million at the box office, costing $40 million. Not bad at all, but the real victory was elsewhere. The film collected a whole truck of nominations, including Oscars for Best Picture and Best Director. Technically speaking, that's when Hollywood forgave Mel, or at least tried to, because that forgiveness didn't translate into a flood of great acting offers afterward. Sure, it was nice that Gibson started getting offers again, but it was hard to celebrate too much when most of them had budgets that barely covered a couple of Milky Ways and earned even less. Among them were Boss Level, Force of Nature, The Professor, and The Madman and Dragged Across Concrete. The only financial success turned out to be the small drama Father Stu, where Mel played a supporting role. The story follows a boxer who becomes a priest, and of course, that was exactly the kind of film Gibson just couldn't pass. The film's success was easy to explain. It cost just $4 million and made $22 at the box office. Mel's producer gig Sound of Freedom in 2023 did way better. Made for just $15 million, it earned $250 and scored solid reviews from both critics and audiences. Seeing how well things went when he stayed behind the camera, Gibson decided to get back to directing, and last year he released Flight Risk. That one didn't have the kind of content to activate big history pros, so it went pretty unnoticed, earning just $50 million on a budget of $25. Audience ratings scored around 5 out of 10, and most critics didn't even bother paying attention to the talented director's comeback. Still, Mel's got a couple of aces left up his sleeve. The first one he found back in the early 2020s, digging the Lethal Weapon franchise out of the crypt. It's possible that Richard Donner's passing was the catalyst. Maybe Gibson just wanted to make something in memory of the beloved director who turned him into a superstar. Talks about a 5th part have been going on for ages, and Gibson's still planning to both direct and star in it himself. Though it looks like that'll happen after his second big ace, The Passion of the Christ sequel. Gibson split it into 2 parts and has already found $200 million for the whole project somewhere. We'll see how all that turns out in 2027. And after that, there's even a chance we'll get to see a 70-year-old Martin Riggs and an 80-year-old Roger Murtaugh squabbling like an old married couple. Until then, though, we'll have to observe Mel starring in movies of some very questionable quality like Monster Summer. Yeah, Mel Gibson could have easily spent his senior years like Sean Connery or Marlon Brando, walking around naked on set because why the heck not? while respected directors breathe into fists and hand millions for 20 minutes of screen time. But Mel chose a different path, one he carved out himself, hitting the bottom not because of bad roles or bad luck, but entirely by his own doing, just like Mickey Rourke. But Mickey took it to a whole new level. He went from Hollywood's golden boy to living in a truck, beating people up and cutting pieces off himself. Check out our video about him. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, hype the vid, whatever that means, and see you next time.